Hit the button.
Yeah, but your mic's on now.
Okay.
Although I found this page 180 and you're trying to get back to that, I'm doing all, trying to remember all the keyboard shortcuts. Scrolling just doesn't work. It doesn't cut.
On your agenda, there's another tab. Yeah. So you can do 4.1, 4.2, 4.3.
Yeah.
Oh.
And jump.
Oh, that part, yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order and see if there are any additions, deletions to the agenda. I'm not even looking to my left. Okay. Any disclosure of interest in any of the items? Okay. Just a quick note to the gallery is that we won't be taking public input today. This isn't a public input session, so there won't be an opportunity for anyone from the public to discuss any of the matters. It'll just be the applicant and staff. So, hearing no additions or disclosures of conflict, we will move into 4.1. And if we can get staff the zoning amendment, the application zone for Lawson Engineering and Development Services.
The first application on the agenda is a rezoning application by Lawson Engineering and Development Services Limited. The owner of the property is Hillcrest Muse Incorporated. It's a 1 hectare in area parcel just east of Hillcrest School. And the proposal is to rezone the property from R1 single family residential to CD 19, Comprehensive Development Zone 19. And in your package is a comprehensive proposal by the applicant. And if the property is rezoned to this specialized site-specific zone, it would enable a 20 to 22 lot subdivision as shown on the proposed site plan. The property is, the previous council might be familiar with it because it was at one time, not too long ago, zoned A2, Rural Holding Zone. And council rezoned it to R1 approximately 4 years ago. When that property came to you, there was questions about subdivision potential, and it was determined at that time that subdivision potential would be quite limited with a conventional subdivision. As well, when I talk about conventional subdivision, I refer to the subdivision immediately to the west, which the developer Gary Massier has almost built this one out to its full extent on 24th Street Southeast. The difference being is you could not develop this as a conventional subdivision without adjoining the properties to the east to make it wider and to have more access and egress. So what is being proposed is a Bearland Strata subdivision, and it's very similar in scale and massing and form to that of the Maplewood subdivision between Okanagan and Fifth Avenue northeast. It's very similar to that CD zone. One of the big differences is with this proposed zone, it would enable duplex development, and what is proposed at this point is 2 duplexes in the development. Surrounding the property, as I mentioned, is a new single-family development and a conventional subdivision to the west. Older, large lot, single-family residential to the north. Older, single-family residential development to the east. BC Hydro land and a BC Hydro substation further to the east. And on the property itself, in the southeast corner, is a significant area of the property that is secured by a statutory right-of-way for BC Hydro. So that's basically a no development area. And that area is shown quite well on this site plan here. The red area is hydro right-of-way, so you can't build in that area. In the official community plan, the property is designated for low-density residential, and also there is a greenway connection identified through the property, through the southern portion of the property, to connect to the subdivision to the west, which eventually connects to Hillcrest School. And the idea being that when all said and done and all the trails are built, there would be a connection to the mobile home park further to the east. And the Greenways Committee is working on that plan with staff. And we have been talking with BC Hydro, and they're in favor of allowing a trail over their property. And so that's a greenway aspect of this. In many ways, the proposed zone resembles the R4 zone, medium density residential zone. As I mentioned, it resembles a Maplewood CD zone, and but the density does not exceed the low density threshold of 22 units per hectare. So it still falls within the low density category. And that's about all I have to say for this intro.
Okay, I'll ask the applicant if they would like to present. No? Okay. So that will open it up to questions from council.
And we do need a motion, Your Worship.
I guess we do need a motion. Moved by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, second by Councillor Lavery. Okay. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Elias. I just have a couple of clarification questions, and perhaps either staff or the applicant can respond to those. On page 2 of our report, under permitted uses, section 57.3, accessory use, does it, so including home occupation. So I could you, if either staff or the applicant, explain that to me a little bit? And does that include a potential R8 down the line, I guess, was my question as well.
Your Worship, home occupation is basically a home-based business. Okay. And home-based businesses have a wide range of uses, but not including a secondary suite. So a secondary suite would not be permitted.
So R8 will not be in the CD zone?
That's correct, but one could have an office in their house.
Great, thank you very much for that one. I have one or two more questions.
Go ahead.
Your Worship, if that's okay. And I was wondering if the applicant talk a little bit about the thinking of side yard parking. I think that's on page 11, there's a reference to it.
Good morning. Yeah, side yard parking is basically we want to allow the ability for all houses to have one primary garage and then also either have a secondary garage or side parking to accommodate for any on-street parking. Obviously, it's going to be a narrowed road width, so we just want to accommodate for that, whether side yard or with a dual garage.
Thank you, and that'd be at the wish of the prospective home buyer?
Yeah, and we're dealing with the architect right now to basically allow where our building setbacks will be to allow for side yard parking on every individual lot.
And that was my next question, on every lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I just have two more questions, actually, hopefully quick ones. I noticed the schematic shows two duplexes just on the plan. Is that the general thinking now? And what is the
I think it,
calculation by the applicant of duplexes versus, versus single-family homes. And I'm not being pejorative about duplexes at all, but just my sense of what the applicant's thinking is at this stage.
I believe it was the developer's wish to basically leave that opportunity open if they did wish to pursue it. At this point in time, I believe they're more drawn to a single-family home, but they basically just didn't want to rule that out early in the preliminary staging of this stuff.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that. And on page 12, just towards the end of the page, and actually, normally I try not to be a grammar Nazi or anything like that. And typos easily happen, but and often I miss them, but this one just jumped up at me. On the paragraph just before section 5, off-site frontage improvements and infrastructure extensions will be a cost not barred by the developer, I'm assuming, but borne by the developer. Is that?
No.
Yeah.
Not that it have, I think, any legal implication at all, but I think that the implication is the developer is indeed picking that up and not borrowing it. That's my understanding?
Yes, correct.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anything further?
No.
Any other questions from council? Any comments before I call the question? I know. Okay, Councillor Lavery, go ahead.
Just a brief comment. I think that certainly as presented by the applicant and staff, that this is a very creative approach to, and I accept the applicant's rationale here in terms of providing more affordable housing and playing with the constraints of road allowance and a number of the things that are involved there, setbacks. I think it's a creative approach. The market will dictate how popular that is, but I think it is a creative approach to hitting a market niche that we're definitely in need of. So I support that, and will vote in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I too will support moving this to the next step. I agree that it's a creative approach and the smaller footprint, smaller home, and it's a good use of an existing property that fits within the OCP, so happy to support it.
I see no other speakers. I will call the question. All those in favor? It's carried. Thanks. So 4.2, and if we can get a motion for 4.2 to bring it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Lavery, second by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, and staff to read the motion.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that a bylaw be prepared, adoption of which would amend zoning bylaw 2303 by rezoning Lot 18, Plan 31204 from R1 single family to R8 residential suite zone, and that final reading be withheld subject to confirmation that the proposed suite meets zoning bylaw and BC Building Code requirements.
And to Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, the property under application is owned by Mike Smith, and it's addressed at 2150 21st Street Northeast. And the proposal is to rezone the property from R1 single family residential to R8 residential suite zone to allow for the construction and use of a secondary suite within the existing home. The applicant has building plans ready to go for a building permit application, and the way that the layout of the basement suite was originally intended, it would have been slightly too large for a secondary suite. So the applicant had to scale down the design of the suite slightly. This area here cannot be part of the suite in order for it to stay under the 960 square foot threshold for a suite as per BC Building Code. The OCP supports R8 zoning in this neighborhood, and staff are recommending support.
Okay. I don't know if the applicant's here. Would like to say, would you care to say anything or present to council?
Sure.
Okay. Please come to the microphone and say your name and address, please.
My name is Mike Simpson. I reside in Ladner, BC. We originally had purchased the house this summer with the intent of renting out the entire house until perhaps our family would move up here. We have family in the area. We talked with many friends that we have up here and family, and just found a renter in part who only needed half the house, and found there was such demand for other housing options, so we decided to move ahead with creating a secondary suite. So that's just a bit about the motivation behind it.
Thank you. Council have any questions for the presenter or for staff? Okay, thank you very much. Any comments? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Eliason. Actually, it's not often we get a captive gallery here, so I'm just going to expound a little bit. I fully support this application, so that's getting that over with. I think it makes absolute sense. But what we really have in front of us here this morning are 4 agenda items of increasing housing options within the city, and I think it's really quite interesting. They're all different. Some may be more controversial than others, but these are all proposals to increase housing stock along the housing continuum. And this one here, and it's something that we deal with at Council a fair amount at this table. It's what's called an R8 application, either for a secondary suite or it can be, if there's room, a detached house. So could we go to page 40, please? I think that's Appendix 4. Thank you very much. And so just an example of, again, R8 is that secondary suite option. You can start to see, and I'll probably refer your worship to the R8 map on the next application as well, but you can start to see the dark brown spots here of R8 that are starting to crop up through all areas of the city to provide legalized, up-to-code secondary suites that help with infill and with smart growth and addressing housing affordability and rental accommodation. So it's something that this table, this council, the past council actively, and the past councils have actively supported. We'll see what happens with this council, but it's pretty well, for me, a no-brainer in terms of, again, getting reasonable, up-to-code legal suites in here, and I thank you for your. We know this at this table, but I just wanted to take advantage of the of the gallery here right now, of the thinking that so far has come from this table. I'll support this fully.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you to the applicant, could I ask a question?
Sure. Mr. Simpson.
So welcome to Salmon Arm.
Thank you.
Come all the way from Ladner. That's a long day. What I wanted to ask is, as a not yet occupant of the home, have you had an opportunity to speak with your neighbors as of yet?
Yeah, I met with them all, well, in close vicinity over the summer.
Okay.
And just informed them of what I had planned to do.
All right.
Gave them my contact information.
Okay, great. That's so important so that they don't get any surprises. And I really appreciate the forward-thinking approach to recognizing a need and addressing it through a home that you've purchased here.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I think we have declined 1 R8 application in my time here at council. So thanks staff and the applicants for bringing these forward. So on that, no further speakers. We'll call a question. Call the question. All those in favor? It's carried. Which takes us to 4.3. And if I can get a motion from the table. Councillor Lindgren, second by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, and staff, if you can read the motion, please.
Moved by Councillor Lindgren, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to Council that a bylaw be prepared, adoption of which would amend zoning bylaw 2303 by rezoning lot 12, plan 19260 from R7 large lot single-family residential to R8 residential suite zone and R1 single-family residential as shown in Schedule A of the staff report dated January 25th, 2019.
Okay. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, this application is is similar but slightly different to the previous R8 rezoning application. With this property located at the corner of 17th Street and 15th Avenue Southeast in Hillcrest, the property is R7 zone, which is large lot, with a minimum parcel size of 1/3 of an acre. And there's an application to subdivide the property in stream right now. And here's the sketch plan of subdivision. The house is located on proposed lot 1, and the remainder is proposed lot 2. And the rezoning application is to rezone proposed lot 2 from R7 to R8, residential suite zone, and to rezone the larger lot 1 to R1. In this case, the applicant and the owner, same person, Mr. Green, is quite adamant that he doesn't want to he doesn't want to rezone lot 1 to R8. He wants to keep it R1, or he wants to rezone to R1 because he's concerned a little bit about taxes, property taxes. So staff did, encourage him to rezone it to R8 and said this is your opportunity, but he just wants to rezone proposed lot 2 to R8.
Okay. I'm not sure if the applicant's here and has anything, and if you'd like to explain further to council, please state your name and address.
Hello, Stephen Green. I live at 1461 17th Street. The reason I'm not looking to rezone, because I live in that property myself, and I'm not looking at multi-residents in there at this time. It's not to say in the future I don't change my mind. I think there's enough space for it.
Okay. Yes. Any questions for the applicant from council? Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Same as the previous applicant, have you had an opportunity to chat with your neighbours about the plans?
Yeah, most of my neighbours are aware of
Okay.
of what I'm looking to do, and one of my neighbours is planning on doing the same thing.
I see.
So,
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
okay.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I don't see any further questions. Any questions from council for staff? Any comments? Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Eliason. In keeping with my threat to bore the gallery even more, if we just turn to page 52, please, Appendix 4. And again, another example of R8s, and I think there's a lot going on in here. So up in the Hillcrest area are 7 large lots, mainly for septic fields. And they are gradually being redeveloped and split up into individual units. You can see the light brown being R7. And 2 things about R8 that are happening: individual applications, much like we have in front of us, which I will support. And then just to the right, there's some block R8s where new developments are coming in and zoning the whole proposed development as an R8. So that's some of the stuff that we're facing here right now. The advantage of the block stuff is actually if you're buying a house going into a new neighborhood, you are aware that the possibility of secondary suites exists. So again, all part of infill and smart growth, and as has been mentioned, we've been supporting this pretty consistently, and I will support this application here now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And any further comments from council? Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I think for me, it's sort of along the lines of what Tim's talking about, is just that we need to educate people about this. And my family actually owns a rental suite in Salmon Arm, and when we put it up for rent, we frequently see up to 40 or 50 applicants in the first 2 hours that it's advertised online. And that shows that there's a huge need for secondary suites in this city. A number of those people are living in their RVs or living in their parents' basement on the couch, or staying with friends, or are living rough because they've been looking for housing for a year or more and haven't been able to find something. So I'm really happy to support anything that looks like we're going to end up with more rental suites.
Okay, Thank you. And I think another thing that this map shows is the legal R8 zoning, which is the, has adequate parking, has the proper access and egress from the bedrooms and from the suite, and the proper lock off from the main residence. So safety as well as metering and billing. So it's not to say that there aren't other suites in this map, but those are the ones that have been brought forward to council, and those are the ones that have been approved. So seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So motion for 4.4 from the table. Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, and this is a long one, staff, if you wouldn't mind.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, seconded by Councillor Wallace-Richmond, that the Development and Planning Services Committee recommends to council that a bylaw be prepared, adoption of which would amend zoning bylaw 2303 by rezoning lots 1 and 2, Plan 3538 from R4 medium density residential to R6 mobile home park zone, and that final reading be withheld subject to the following: registration of a section 219 covenant that would secure a 20-meter wide road reserve connecting 45th Street northeast to Canoe Beach Drive, and the land needed for road widening along Canoe Beach Drive to an ultimate width of 20 meters, with the two road alignments to match Plan EPP 5948 prepared by Brown Johnson Land Surveyors, and further that a bylaw be prepared, adoption of which would amend Section 6 R6 Mobile Home Park Zone of Zoning Bylaw 2303 as follows: add the following subsection and renumber accordingly. Notwithstanding the minimum parcel area for a mobile home park may be reduced to an area not less than 1 hectare when land dedication is provided for road widening or when a road reserve covenant is secured by the city. And notwithstanding the maximum density may be increased higher than 17 units per hectare to a limit not exceeding the maximum density policies of the OCP.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a rezoning application regarding the properties located at 4400 and 4600 Canoe Beach Drive in Canoe. It's also an application to amend the R6 zone with 2 new sections regarding density and minimum lot size. This application was made to the city back in October last year, and these 2 properties have quite a lot of history to them. They're very large properties, relatively speaking. They were rezoned from R1 to R4 about 12 years ago for a previous development proposal for a townhouse development. And with that proposal, there was a development permit approved for 50 townhouse units on Lot 1. And that was approved as well, but that development never happened, never occurred. So the property's been sitting vacant for a long time, and the Tarnos have an interest in rezoning the 2 lots to R6 mobile home park zone, and their intention is to develop 60 mobile home park spaces on the 2 lots. And with that development, they would dedicate the 45th Street connector from the Lakeside Pines subdivision to the south to Canoe Beach Drive to the north. And they would also dedicate all the necessary land to widen out Canoe Beach Drive to its full width required by the bylaw. And in terms of the official community plan, the property is designated low-density residential in the OCP, and that designation supports, it's designated medium-density residential, and that designation supports the R6 zone. And as mentioned, the property was rezoned from R1 to R4 about 12 years ago. I'll just go through all the appendices here. This map here shows all the mobile home parks in Salmon Arm that are zoned R6, and the one mobile home park in Canoe Canoe Creek Estates, which is zoned R1, single-family residential. That goes back to the 1970s, and there's a land use contract on that property, which allows the zoning to be non-conforming, but the land use contract addresses the mobile home park development on there. This is this cross-section of the Canoe Beach Drive right-of-way, and the applicants, the Tarnos, are willing to upgrade Canoe Beach Drive to the full standard of the bylaw for the frontage of Lot 2. With their variance application, which is not in front of you today, they will be applying to forego upgrading the frontage along Lot 1. And in terms of 45th Street, they are willing to dedicate and upgrade 45th Street in accordance with the bylaw to the local urban road standard. As mentioned, the OCP policies support the zoning and they support the development. And with this application, there's 2 amendments to the R6 zone. One is to allow for a decrease in the minimum lot size needed for a mobile home park. Presently, one needs to have 2 hectares of land, which is quite a bit, in order to develop a mobile home park with R6 zoning. It's actually the most restrictive minimum lot size we have in the residential zones. None of the R4 stratas you see around town have anything like that. So the idea here being that if the developer dedicates land for road, which is not exactly necessary, or I should say it is necessary, but it's not required with the development of a mobile home park, the dedication of land for road. But in this case, the applicant is agreeable to it. And so as almost like a bonus, there would be a reduction of the minimum lot size down to 1 hectare. And with that also to allow for the maximum density to go from 17 units per hectare up to a density that does not exceed the maximum density policies of the OCP. In this case, medium density allows 40 units per hectare. So as you can see in the staff report, there's discussion about density. Maximum density supported by the OCP is actually 140 units on those 2 lots. The maximum density permitted by the R6 zone is 60 units. That's with based on the gross lot area. Maximum density permitted based on the net parcel area, that's after road dedication, is 55 units. And the maximum density of the lot, if the lots were zoned R1, based on the net parcel area, is 68 units. So even with R1 zoning, 60 units would be permissive. The Tarnos have done quite a bit of work. They've refined their site plan several times since October. This is the 3rd rendition that you have in your package in Appendix 1. They've been working with Lawson Engineering to come up with a site plan. It's a combination of double-wide and single-wide modular homes. My report speaks to why mobile home park zoning is sort of few and far between around the city, around the fringe of the urban containment boundary, and the reasons for that. And I think what it boils down to is a little bit of a negative perception of mobile home parks, particularly because of the single-wide form and character of those developments, among other reasons. But I mean, one could write a whole essay on that. So I don't do that. I read a little bit about it. But the applicants have a PowerPoint presentation, and they're willing and eager to present to you.
Okay. And just before I invite the applicants to speak, I just want to, for the gallery, update the process. So this morning we're having a development and planning meeting where we meet as a group to discuss issues with staff and the applicants. There's no formal decisions that are made here, just recommendations for our council meeting, which will happen next Monday. Next Monday we will be giving all of these things that you've seen here a first and second reading so that the applicant can then go out and advertise to the public for a public hearing. And that public hearing happens at our evening meeting, and that can happen anywhere between 2 weeks after next Monday or 4, 6, 8 weeks. So generally it's 2 weeks, but in this application, I've spoke with staff, because we're waiting for the variance, it won't be the 2 weeks following, and so on and so forth. Also, no matter what the council votes here at this meeting, this application and all the other applications go forward to the public, or to our council meeting for first and second reading. So even if council chooses to approve this to move it forward, it's just a recommendation. If they choose not to approve it to move it forward, it's still taken forward to next Monday as a recommendation and heard in the public council meeting. So with that being said, I hope it's more clear, but we'll invite the applicant to speak. If you could just give us your name and address, please.
My name's Carrie. I live at 240 24th Street Northeast.
Good morning. Welcome to council.
Thanks. All right, good morning. My name is Carrie. I'm here to speak about rezoning 4400 and 4600 Canoe Beach Drive to R6. People have figured out that Salmon Arm is an amazing place to live. We're a community that supports the health and well-being of seniors in retirement while also being the perfect place to raise a family. Salmon Arm has it all, and people want to live here. However, it's not that easy for a lot of people. Home prices have made that dream unattainable for many. The lack of affordable housing was a very hot topic with the public and elected officials during the civic elections as an issue that needs attention. We've come up with a solution. Based on the average price of a house for sale on December 18th, 2018, and the median income in Salmon Arm of $62,000 per year, a family has to spend 49% of their income to be able to afford a home. The Credit Council of Canada suggests no more than 35% of household income be allocated towards housing. With the new mortgage stress test, rising interest rates, and the price increases we've seen over the last few years, it's very difficult for a family to qualify for a decent family home. I'm not sure if anyone here rents, has rented, or rents out a place to others in Salmon Arm, but it's extremely hard to find a place to call home that's affordable. One-bedroom basement suites rent for around $1,000, and if you're looking for a family, it's tough to find any options under $2,000. It's difficult for young families and people on a fixed income or pension to find and afford somewhere to live. So what's the solution? One option is a new manufactured home community, a combination of 1 to 4 bedroom homes that will be affordable for people at all income levels. This is what people used to think about when you would mention mobile home, manufactured home, or trailer park. This is no longer the case. In recent years, more people are becoming interested in factory-built options. The popularity and change in attitude toward factory-built options is clear by the number of shows on TV about factory-built, modular, and manufactured homes. Come spend an hour at our office and you'll hear many of the people that come through our show home say, "Wow, these sure have come a long way." Modern manufactured homes are essentially the same as a site-built home. They're just built in a controlled environment. Factory-built homes have 2x6 walls, R51 attic insulation, and meet Energy Star efficiency standards. By building in a factory setting, we're able to build the homes at a far lower price. This is a project we worked on from 2014 to 2017, and a perfect example of what a modern manufactured home community should look like. We designed the exterior of the homes and landscape all lots to ensure the development is aesthetically pleasing. We took what was a dilapidated trailer park with abandoned homes and only one existing resident and turned it into a thriving community of around 70 residents in 33 homes. The houses sold into this development ranged in price from $125,000 to $210,000, with the average price being around $165,000. If you take a drive through, and I encourage you to do that, you'll see there is a sense of pride throughout the community. We as a company are very proud of the end result. Every home that is resold in the development has gone up in value. On the right side of your screen is a townhouse in Salmon Arm. It's 1,700 square feet, 3-bed, 2.5 baths, and listed at $349,000. On the left is one of our 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes with a price of $180,000. The cost to, okay, let's start with the townhouse. When you take the mortgage, property taxes, and strata fees, the monthly cost of ownership is $2,138. And that doesn't take into account insurance, utilities, or maintenance. If you're trying to stay within the Credit Council of Canada's guidelines of 35%, you would need a household income of $73,300 to comfortably afford that home. The cost to own our 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,500 square foot home with mortgage, property taxes, and pad rent included is $1,388 per month. To be within the Credit Council's guidelines for this home, a household income of only $47,600 is needed. A household consisting of 2 adults working full-time minimum wage jobs brings in over $50,000 per year, making this a very affordable option. We can also provide families access to home ownership for as low as $125,000 for a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. Their total monthly cost of $1,107 would be comparable to renting a 1-bedroom basement suite. So, when compared to a basement suite, we're able to provide an extra bedroom, an extra bathroom, a yard, your own driveway, the flexibility to have a family pet, all while owning the home and building equity every month. A major challenge we face today is there just isn't many places someone purchasing a manufactured home can put it. Communities that exist have low turnover, and when people do decide to move, they just sell their house where it is, so the lots never open up. Right now, the only option in Salmon Arm is to buy an existing home and move it or demolish it in order to have a place to put a new home. This adds a huge cost to the homeowner, but people are desperate and it does happen. Our industry got a bad reputation from poor quality homes that were built in the 70s and 80s. So even though they're a great option in helping solve the affordable housing crisis in our province, in the past it has been hard to get zoning because of the stigma that once existed with manufactured homes. Our proposed development is a great affordable option for many people who otherwise may never be able to achieve home ownership. We'd like the City of Salmon Arm to help give them the opportunity to have a place to call home. Our proposed community is close to the beach, parks, playgrounds, and baseball field. It is walking distance to the community store and serviced by local transit to downtown. Most of the surrounding homes are also manufactured homes that were built in the 1990s. With the development of our proposed community comes a lot of benefits to the residents of Canoe and the City of Salmon Arm. We'll be widening Canoe Beach Drive and starting the boulevard sidewalk that will provide a safer way for the kids at Canoe to get down to the ball field in Canoe Beach during the summer. We will also be completing 45th Street, providing an important second emergency exit to the residents of Canoe. On top of that, the community will generate an estimated $120,000 in annual taxes when completed. Under R4 zoning, the property has sat on the market for over a decade because the cost of infrastructure and land upgrades make it uneconomical to develop. The current zoning also restricts our ability to provide affordable housing to Salmon Arm because the homeowner must be able to purchase the land, which adds $125,000 or more to the final price tag. Under R6 zoning, people would be able to own the home while renting the lot, which reduces the price and barriers to ownership. The rezoning of the property to a manufactured home community allows the property to become economical to develop as a long-term investment property. Salmon Arm is an amazing city to live in. Rezoning 4400 and 4600 Canoe Beach Drive to R6 would be a big step towards making it more affordable for the people lucky enough to call Salmon Arm home. Thanks for your time. And I should just note, I haven't talked to the neighbors yet, but I plan to.
Okay. I'll open it up to council for any questions or comments. for the applicant? Or Councillor Lindgren?
I think my question's probably for staff.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant at this time? Not at this time. Thanks very much. And we'll call you. Oh, that was close. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. And I think one of the things is as we go through planning and then the first and second reading and third readings, we're going to be repeating questions and information all the time. I think it's a good part of the process because it gives information time to percolate in, and so I fully expect we'll be seeing this presentation again, and we should see it as well, and as well as some of our questions you might hear again as well.
Okay.
The estimated rental cost per month
Yes.
is how much?
Sorry.
Pad rent.
The pad rental.
$425.
$425 a month.
Yeah.
And would that include, and that would absolve any potential,
Yeah, that includes their sewer, water, and taxes on the land.
and taxation as well?
They pay the taxes on their home.
Great. And a second question on the, if we could maybe see the schematic again. On the double, the schematic shows double wide location, and I'm not sure if it's on yours or
Page
on.
63. There. On our presentation.
It's probably on our
Okay.
on our presentation. So along Canoe Beach Drive, it shows double wides there.
Yeah.
Is the intent, I think I know the answer to this question, but I need to ask it, is the intent to confine that to double wides
So what we're planning,
along,
Canoe Beach Drive?
yes.
Yeah, so what we're planning to do is build homes that fit each lot. So along Canoe Beach Drive, we would probably start there because those are some of the nicest lots. And we're going to build and design a house that fits there so that we can make sure it looks good from both sides, because I know that's a busy street. But saying that, I'm not going to rule out the option that if we get 3 in there and someone says, I want this house on that lot, then we would probably be open to that as well. But I don't think we're probably going to not do single wides down that side, just double wides.
Okay, thank you very much at this stage, and I have questions for staff as well after.
Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. Very thorough. You've clearly done quite an amount of work to get it to this stage. I can't tell from when I zoom in. Will there be a fence in the front on Canoe Beach Drive?
So that's one of our variances. The mobile home park bylaw does call for a fence to go all the way around the mobile home park, but along, I don't know, the right side, if you're looking at it from my side, we're going to do a 6-foot vinyl fence along the neighbors and then along the back as well. And then the ball field has its own fence on that side, but we don't want to do a fence down the front, so that's one of the variances we asked for because we just think it'll kind of look funny.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Lindgren.
Changed my mind. Thank you. So I have a question about the cost, long-term cost for people who live there, and maybe you've thought this through because you've been putting a lot of time into this.
Yeah.
I buy my house for $400,000 and I put a rental suite in the basement, and suddenly my carrying costs are cut in half, and for about $1,000 a month I can own a house.
Yeah.
When people buy into a manufactured home park or a mobile home park where they have to pay pad rent, they, one, don't have any option to put in a rental,
Right.
and 2, never ever outgrow the 425, and it's only going to go up from there, that they have to pay every month.
Yeah.
Now, I pay about $2,400 a year in taxes, and the costs to these people, low-income people, is going to be more like $5,000 a year. So how does this help low-income people get financially improve it? How do they improve their financial standing if they buy into this program?
That's a good question. So I'm just going to take a stab in the dark, but I'm going to say your house is over 400,000. So the people going into this, they're not going to qualify for that house anyways, so it's not really an option. What we see is we get a lot of people that it's their first home or it's their last home. So you know, they're not going to stay here forever. If they want to, they can, obviously, but we get a lot of young families that 125,000, 5% down, you know, they're 7,500 and they're into a house, and then they're paying what they were paying for a 1-bedroom basement suite that they were cramped in. They stay there for a few years, build some equity, and then, like, there's an example of the last one we did. We had a single mother. She has 2 kids. She bought it for 110, I think, stayed for 3 years, and then she sold it for 180 and moved to Canoe and bought a traditional house on a fee simple lot. And so that's one example of how it can work for people. They're in the market, so then their house does appreciate over time, the same as any house would, and they're going from renting to owning something, you know. So they're putting their money towards equity. Another thing we see is people that own the house with the basement suite have it fully paid off. You know, it's $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, and they're ready to downsize. You know, they're 65, 75 years old. They don't want as much. They still want a yard before they go into an apartment where their meals are cooked and everything. So what they get then is they free up all that extra money. They can travel a bit more. They can retire. Then their house, they don't have $600,000 sitting in their house. They have $150,000. They've got $350,000, you know, extra buffer to do the things they want to do: visit family, go on longer trips. And if you look at the price, or the 420, if you look at the 425 and put that into a mortgage, the equivalent, if you bought a lot, would be 75,000. So you're not going to find that anywhere. So it is a pretty good deal when you look at it that way, and it works for a lot of people in different stages of life. It's not for everyone, but it's a really good option for a lot of people.
Right. So, I mean, I'd be more inclined to be all over this if people were able to buy that little piece of land that their mobile was on. Right. But my other question is, so in the 60s, 70s, 80s, sort of the classic mobile home park you put up there, sure. People couldn't, there was a lot of difficulty financing those mobile homes, especially when they weren't new. So if you were trying to buy a 30-year-old mobile, it was difficult to get a long-term mortgage on that. Is it different with manufactured home parks? Manufactured homes, I guess?
It was, like anything that was, because of the way they were built, banks and people doing the financing wouldn't touch stuff. But now that they're built so well, like they're built to CSA standards, Z240 standards, they're built as nice as a house. So they're going to last as long as people take care of it. If you live in a stick-built house and don't maintain it, it's not going to last either. But if you maintain your home, it's going to last forever. So yeah, no, we haven't had any problem getting people financed on new homes.
On new ones. I'm curious more about what happens in 20 years. Will banks still finance them? But I mean, it might be hard to answer.
Yeah, I can't answer that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions for our presenter? Okay, thanks very much.
All right. I've got this printout of the presentation.
You can just give it to staff and then they'll deliver it to us. Thank you. Questions for staff? Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, and through you, Your Worship, to the Director of Development. Under the current zoning, manufactured homes are allowed. Are there restrictions on single wide versus double wide? And
Your Worship, in the R4 zone, which is what it is now, you cannot have a single wide. The only zone that allows a single wide is the R6 zone.
Is the R6 zone. And then my next question was on the R4 zone, and I think it's clear in the report, but just to be specific, how many units could you fit on it now as an R4? R4 single, yeah.
R4 double wide.
Yes, thank you.
R4 double wide?
That's a lot of math. Good morning.
I don't know, 55 maybe?
55, okay.
Approximately?
I see, all right. But with the density, it could fit as many as 150?
140.
140, okay, thank you.
Units. And just to clarify on Councillor Wallace-Richmond's question, so double wides would be allowed on the R4 zoning, but those would be fee simple. That wouldn't be a pad. Or would that be a mobile home park?
So with R4 zoning, you could have double wide homes on a bareland strata.
Okay.
The rezoning application that you looked at first thing this morning, so in theory, you could have double wide homes on that proposal as well.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Questions for staff? Wallace Richmond, you're finished. Thank you. Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have a number of questions, and I just want to, partly for me, but partly for the gallery as well, and I think these questions will come up again. Looking at existing services through Your Worship to staff, I'd like to just get a breakdown, service by service, of where the existing water service is, waste service, storm service, and I know there are no sidewalks, but sidewalk service as well.
Your Worship, normally with rezoning applications, we don't include that level of detail about servicing.
Yes, thank you, and I understand that, but I think that, and we are going to look at that later down the line, but I'm looking for, at this stage at least, for a general overview. It doesn't have to be so granular down to the meter.
I think we'll let the Director of Engineering and Public Works take a stab at this one.
Thank you.
So, Your Worship, we'll just get the map up here on the screen. So, in answer to Councillor Lavery's question, the sanitary sewer service, it actually traverses through the property right now, and it goes to Mosquito Park lift station. There's also a dead-ended sanitary service at the east end of the property. And then the storm service is in green, and you can see that there's a couple of outlets there. And the water service runs the entire frontage, but it's under-serviced. It's a 100 mil water main, so that would have to be upgraded. Now, all the servicing would have to meet the subdivision development services bylaw at that point. And again, in discussion of possible variances, so the property is serviceable. We'll have to see what the applicant is looking at varying.
Thank you very much for that. It's really helpful. And I just, and then I'll just check my confirmation. I know there are no sidewalks there at this stage. That's been a big aspect of most people, whether you live in Canoe or not, to see a safe egress to the beach or access to the beach. We will get the development variance permit from the applicant down the line here. But as it stands right now, without any variance, the applicant is responsible for sidewalks on Lot 1 and Lot 2. Is that correct? On Canoe Beach Drive.
That is correct. Canoe Beach Drive has to be built to the RD14 standard, which is the new revised roadway and multi-use pathway along Canoe Beach Drive. And then 45th, if it's developed, it would be developed to an RD2 standard, so a regular street.
Thank you for that. The section west of Lot 1 towards the ball diamonds, any sidewalk installation would be the responsibility of the city. Am I correct in that understanding?
There is a property owned by the Elks that is in between that and the golf course, or sorry, the ball diamonds. And that would have to be either developed by the Elks or the city. Now, what our intention is for the time being would be to have a trail built there to the crosswalk that extends to the Canoe Beach.
Thank you very much for that. And the third and final question on sidewalks is from Lot 2 east to the Hive. Any potential sidewalk there would involve the city obtaining the land first, paying for that, and developing that sidewalk as well. Is that correct?
That's somewhat correct. If there's development along that frontage, they would have to upgrade to the Canoe Beach standard. Yep. But if the city wanted to develop that, there is some homes that actually encroach into the right-of-way, so it might take some time before that gets built.
I understand that as well. I just wanted to confirm that, just as our general understanding. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Any other questions from Councillor Wallace Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship, through you to engineering or development. The extension of 45th to Canoe Beach Drive as a second exit out of that subdivision of Canoe was a request, not a requirement. Is that right?
Your Worship, if we could flip back to my screen here. So I mentioned during my presentation of this that 45th Street Northeast is a planned future connection from Lakeside Pines subdivision to the south to Canoe Beach Drive to the north. And that's a very important connection for a second way out of this subdivision, which never actually occurred. And a road reserve was not secured on this property. So it is a very important linkage. And when I mention that it's not required, what I'm correct when I said that, and what I meant is if these properties were zoned R6, one could in theory develop this property and this property, or they could amalgamate both into one property without having to go through the city for approval and not have to dedicate anything.
Okay. Thanks.
And just to follow up on Councillor Wallace Richmond's question, under the current zoning and the current development permit that was given for this, that roadway is secured. Is that correct?
Your Worship, no, it's not. We have no security of that road.
Under the R4, there's no allowance for that or anything.
No.
And but that property would still require a development permit.
Lot 1 is here, and that's where the DP was approved for the 50-unit townhouse development. And that development included upgrading and building 45th Street.
Okay, that was my question. So the last time at the development permit stage, that was negotiated.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And to be clear, this property has only ever been developed one time. It was an apple plant and an old house. So that's sort of a moot point. My question, just for clarification of the gallery, and I kind of prefaced this before, can you show me the available land for subdivision and that we have sort of pending or approved developments on in the area? Do you have that map around that you could possibly do?
Yeah, Councillor Eliason, you asked for this map from me last week, so I put it together. It's pretty simple. It shows 3 development proposals in the Canoe area that have been approved, but not developed yet. And one is the Park Hill subdivision up on the plateau, 130 lots proposed up there. And then down the hill into the older town, a new subdivision proposal called Turtle Mountain for 11 lots right on the edge of Canoe Pond and on the other side of the street here. I think that's 52nd if I'm not mistaken. And then Club Shuswap is the golf course, and there was a proposal for 160 Bearland strata lots for park model homes.
Okay, and that's still approved?
Yeah, the rezoning has all been approved for that, but not the subdivision.
Okay, this one's just off the last time we had a mobile home park proposed in Canoe was the Shoppick development. Can you quickly outline that?
The Shoppick development is around on the fringe of Canoe Creek in this area, I believe, but I don't know exactly where it is. And I honestly don't know what happened with that one in terms of neighborhood opposition and all that stuff. That predated me.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel old at this table. Been here for a long time. Thanks for answering my questions. Any further questions, Councillor Lavery?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, and this has to do with form and character about, I think it's form and character, if I'm using the right words, about landscaping, and I'm particularly thinking of the exterior landscaping around Canoe Beach Drive. And I guess my question and any comment would be regardless of the applicant. So it's not applicant specific. What, from a city perspective, what options do we have for mandating or from encouraging to mandating landscaping along Canoe Beach Drive?
Director of Development Services.
Being a mobile home park development proposal, and this is the first one that's probably ever gone in front of you, there is no form and character development permit application associated with this, and all the landscaping and screening and buffering requirements are spelled out in the mobile home park bylaw. And the first site plan that was submitted back in October was very basic. It was still something to work off of. Didn't really show any landscaping, and then it gradually progressed to what we have here today. A little bit of back and forth between myself and the Tarnos with the idea of losing fencing along Canoe Beach Drive, and in place of that planting red maple cedar, or sorry, not cedars, red maples at 15 to 20 meter intervals along the boulevard. And internally, there are some trees shown. It's not as elaborate a landscape plan as what was approved with the previous development permit for the 50-unit townhouses, but it is reasonable, in my opinion, compared to the landscaping that you see on the properties to the south.
Thank you very much for that, and I just maybe that's part of a comment here, and I think regardless of the application, part of my consideration is due with it will be. I want to see some more than, and this is again not speaking to the application in front of us particularly, but some enhanced landscaping along what really is a premier strip of Canoe Beach Drive there. So, but I'll save those comments for later. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship, for a third opportunity. So by definition, does a modular home have to be movable?
Not necessarily. It can stay.
I see. Okay. Because I do want to address the elephant in the room question. We haven't approved a modular home in Salmon Arm in almost 25 years. And I think some of the feedback I'm sure the applicants are having to deal with is what happens, what has happened in other communities where development pressures have led to the sale of land with mobile homes on it, which left the pad renters with a house they couldn't move and nowhere to put it. Now, I'm not expecting an answer so much as just whether or not there's a process or any kind of covenant that protects these owners, and maybe the applicant has an answer to that. I don't know. I'm just looking for guidance, Your Worship, on how we might briefly address that question in this case.
Your Worship, I don't have an answer to that.
I saw a hand.
Yeah, please do. Come forward, Chair. And we'll need your name and address for the record. I let Al get away with it earlier, but I shouldn't have. I'm sorry.
My name is Terry Tarno. I live at 1660 18th Avenue Southeast. In a manufactured home park, the ones that you're going to hear about in BC where they're being cleaned out, 95% of the time they're going to be on native land. Okay. Because they can do what they want. The people that are going to live in this community have the same rights as every other renter.
Okay.
We can't come along, and that's why when we set up the subdivision, when we did it, we said at $425 a month, it makes sense over 25 years. That's how we came to this figure. That's how we came to 60 units. We cannot. They're under the same rules as any other rentalsman, so we can't come in there and say, pad number 7 we want your rent to go from 425 to 500. We can't do that.
Okay.
There's a calculation by the rentalsmen in BC, and we fall under that, the same calculation as everybody else.
Okay.
So we can't arbitrarily just raise the rent.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for either staff or the applicant?
Your worship, we would be looking for an amendment as recommended in the report about scheduling of the public hearing, etc. And that would be that third reading be withheld, subject to submission of a detailed landscaping plan and completion of the staff report for VP 491.
Moved by Councillor Lavery, second by Councillor Wallace Richmond. All those in favor of the amendment? Carried. Okay. So the motion as amended, be looking for comments from council on this. Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And again, at this stage, and His Worship has mentioned the process here. So besides the process as we go forward in this, first and second reading, public hearing, third reading, there's always the chance for input all the way along the way, whether that's written input at each stage or written input and or verbal input at the public hearing. So I think this is a process where there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to state what their vision and view on this application is. So I'm going to vote in favor of this to move this process on. The recommendation in front of us is that we proceed with first and second reading of the rezoning bylaw. There'll be lots of consideration on public input and the very legitimate issues that are in front of us. And again, there'll be lots of opportunity for input. So I'll be voting in favor of this to move this process on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. I too will be voting for this to move ahead to council. I think that there's an important community conversation that has begun. I want the applicants to know that I have been receiving letters and all of that information will be shared publicly. And I want the community to know that your input is welcome. I think that out of respect for the amount of work that staff and the applicant has put in, I'd like to see it go to full council meeting. I will add a caution though. As we have a housing task force here in Salmon Arm, we know that we have to address the entire spectrum from shelter housing to supported housing, subsidized rental, market rental, ownership and accessible and affordable ownership. And that the whole effort of the task force only works when we address the entire piece. And so that will, I will be mindful of that. It also means that there will be significant demands on the City of Salmon Arm to contribute to some of those projects which are coming online, including 71 units of deep subsidy rental and market rental, which will require us to contribute in some way or fashion. We have a $200,000 affordable housing reserve. The variance, as I say, that amendment is important because I would not vote to send it to public hearing without seeing those variances, knowing how limited that budget is. So there are constraints here, but I would like to see the conversation continue in a manner as respectful as it has been so far. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond. I've been here for a long time, so I've seen the tearing down of the house and the apple plant. Like talking about today's thing, it was a mid-2000s that Mr. Cheka and Trinity Roy did the housing report for EDS in Salmon Arm, and from that we came up with the new R8 zoning with the Director of Development Services which included legal suites and coach houses, and block zoning for R8 developments and things like the Maple Woods. So I have seen those 3 developments in Canoe come forward to us, and that was the picture that we showed earlier. At the last application for a mobile home park in Canoe, the neighborhood came out and spoke against it unanimously. So I would urge you to talk to your neighbors, but what council's being asked here is to downzone property that is missing in Canoe. And if we could we bring the map up again that director had? We have in Canoe approved single family developments. We have approved, we have existing mobile home parks. We have existing everything. The only one that isn't there is the multifamily. And this is the only flat developable piece close to services in Canoe. And that was what we heard about the property that Tropics brought forward last time. And the neighborhood came out in unanimous support against that and for the stick-built multifamily at this property. So the downzoning for this property will be a challenge because we're looking for density. So I don't want to set the applicants up. This will go to our public council meeting anyways, but it'll be a time when the entire council is here. So with that, we will call the question. All those in favor? Carried. So that takes us to 4.5. Historical buildings. Yeah, a little bit different. And I'll ask staff to, can I get a mover and seconder for the motion? Wallace Richmond, Councillor Lavery, and staff, that the approve the inclusion of 450 and 500 2nd Avenue Northeast and the corresponding statement of significance attached as Appendix 1 to this report in the City of Salmon Community Heritage Register. Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, this is a recommendation from the city's Community Heritage Commission to include the property that we're on now and the Fletcher Park property into the Community Heritage Register as the 50th property in the register. And written up for this was a statement of significance about the historical values of the property and the former schoolhouse building, which at one time was our office before we moved into this building here. This is a neat picture. It shows the old schoolhouse with the new building in the background completed just before we moved into it. And being on the Heritage Register, if this was a private property, it would have slightly different implications. What it means is if there's a demolition permit for any of the buildings, that demolition permit has to be delayed for a period of time, and council has to consider whether they want to get involved or not with the property. In this case, I don't think we'll see a demolition permit in this building for some time, so I think it's a moot point.
Unless, of course, we have a water feature. And this has come about, and just for council's knowledge, we had some buildings that were torn down that there wasn't community input on, and so this was sort of council's deep breath to reconsider some of these properties before any additions, alterations, or demolitions took place. So, Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship, through you, and as the former chair of the Heritage Commission, I commend the work of the commissioners. This is indeed a very historic property that has played many different roles in the community over the years, and the statement of significance is a reflection of that, and I believe it would also include a recognition plaque for the public to be able to see how important this chunk of property really is. So I would encourage my fellow councillors to vote to move it forward to the next, will be adopted at a council meeting, I presume? Yes. Yep. Okay, thanks, Your Worship.
Okay, not seeing any other speakers, call the question. All those in favor? Carried. this opens us up to question and answer period. Is there anyone with questions about the processes or items that we deal with and how we deal with them? You're welcome to come forward to the microphone and ask them, and we may do our best to answer those. Seeing none, a motion to adjourn?
Your worship, we still have one presentation.
Oh, we have a presentation. Snow plowing. Oh, yeah. You guys don't have to stay for this part if you don't want, but we're going to talk about snow plowing, snow removal in the budget. Generally, you guys will probably want to leave. So we'll see y'all later. No, you can't leave, Sylvia.
How do you clear a room?
Why didn't they? You know what? I saw them plowing streets in Canoe this morning. Yeah, we'll take a quick break. 9:21. We'll be back.
Think?
You don't think?
No, not really.
Who's back next time? No, just Kevin's back at next Monday, and then Debbie and Al are back for 2 weeks. Oh, I thought you were gonna have a donut and a donut. I'm like that.
Yeah, I need some coffee.
Tim, I've got the budget book downstairs. Okay. Downstairs or? Yeah, downstairs. Downstairs where? In my car. Well, not downstairs. Downstairs. Snow removal. What's snow reserves, Justin?
Not much, like 80,000-ish.
What's our budget this year?
It's like 900.
Yeah, just call the property.
And so if this doesn't, if this keeps up, then we'll be looking at
Hello.
Yeah. Just about the, so there's a question from Phil Wright about the Wi-Fi.
It won't be any different than what it is now, but he doesn't even know what it is now.
Yeah, so he wants to know what it is now.
So they might not have moved forward on it before because they didn't, like, I actually don't know what's down there, I'm gonna have to talk to Shaw.
Okay.
They might not have installed it previously because they needed to discuss it with, Sasla.
Okay.
So if Phil doesn't know where it is, then it might not be there at all.
Right. Can you find out
I am
that from
going to
Shaw and let me
contact
know?
Shaw, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
We're recording right now, so.
We're here for the Director of Engineering and Public Works. Exciting presentation on ice and snow control program.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Mayor Harrison had asked me to prepare and present basically an overview of our program.
And then he goes to Mexico?
And then he goes to Mexico.
Yes.
So essentially the program that we have is primarily to keep the roads safe and passable for primary services. And that's emergency services, municipal services, such as garbage collection, transit, and school, and general public convenience. Obviously, the limitations are the weather. As we move forward, the operational priorities are based on a level of service, and that's set out by our policy. And you can see the priority ones are arterial and collector roads. Those get the first service during a snowfall. The second area priority is the Central Business District, and I'll get into that in a little more detail as we move forward. And then the third priority is local roads. As you can see, we have a lot of kilometers of roads. We have over 500 driving lanes of roadways within our community, which is a lot per capita. All of the snow clearing routes are completed on a regular weekly schedule. And you can see by the map, we have over 20 different routes that we utilize. Now these routes are prepared, they're usually, so example, Route 1 is typically done within a 2-hour period. So we have the ability within a 24-hour period to get all of the routes complete, if need be. And I'm gonna flip back and forth between the two slides here because this is rather important. You've seen this slide. And now moving forward, these are our priority roads. So the majority of our roads within our community are priorities. And a lot of times during a heavy snowfall, we will have to go back and restart at Route 1. So those are the reasons why we don't get into the residential areas in a really heavy snowstorm, because we have to keep the priority roads open, and that's arterial and collectors. So the first priorities are routes 1 to 9, and it's about 300 kilometers. And obviously the second priority routes, even though they are important, they take a lot longer to do. The subdivisions, obviously, we're moving around, we're moving snow, they're congested areas, so that's why we don't typically go into those first. Now our schedules, our winter shift schedule is modified over the last 10 years. We've had many iterations of how do we do this more efficiently, how do we stretch our crew over a 7-day work week. But we keep coming back to this. We have 12 staff in our roads department. And essentially what we've done this year is we've gone to the 10-hour shifts and during the day and an 8-hour shift at night. And so there's been some misinterpretation of this by people suggesting that we don't have coverage on weekends. Well, we do. We have standby. So what that entails is somebody is on standby. One crew member comes in, does a road check if it's snowing, and that person will call the dispatch, and dispatch will start running down the call-out list and bring in more staff. So if we do have an event on a Saturday, staff come out. And I don't think there's ever been a case where our staff have refused to come out and assist. So that's not a problem for us. During the 10-hour shifts, we find that it's more of an organization of our crew. So you can see on the Mondays and Fridays, we have less staff. But this is covered by our utility staff and some of our other. So we also have a machinist and a carpenter who can also run equipment during the regular work days. And also our utility staff are utilized for major events on a Monday or a Friday. So we have a number of staff that can come out and assist if there are major events. This is the equipment list that we have. Now we have 15 different pieces of equipment. Obviously not all of them do the same jobs, and you can see on the little annotations at the back, some are plowing, some are for sand and salt, and there's only one for magnesium chloride application. So when we're dealing with equipment breakdowns, which often happens during the winter, it puts a crink into our system. And so some of these larger units, the tandem, for instance, is a very important piece of our equipment. And it does specific tasks. If that goes down, we're very limited in what we can do. So it's very important that we maintain those pieces of equipment as well. And then there's also 3 pieces of equipment that we utilize for our snow clearing program, and that is 1 Bobcat and then 2 trackless units. And we'll get into that. This is just some pictures of different snow operations, some of our equipment. You can see we have 4x4s with front blades, sanders in the back. We have larger units, tandems, single axle units. This is one of our trackless units in operation. We have loaders. So because of the variety of road surfaces, we have asphalt roads, gravel roads, rural roads, urban roads. In regards to our sidewalk operations, we have almost 70 kilometers of sidewalks within the community. I apologize, it's a little bit light. You can't really see the colors that well. In the downtown area, there's a bylaw, 2030, which requires the businesses to remove their snow in the mornings. And all of the other sidewalks are maintained by city staff. with those units. Now, obviously, we can't bring it down to a summer condition. We do sand in some locations, but ultimately it is winter, and we can only bring a service level up to what we can afford. So we have the 3 pieces of equipment. In the past, we have utilized contractors, but we found that depending on the variety of the snow year or how severe it is, we find that it just is a little bit more efficient with our own staff doing the snow on the side oak removal. We also have, most of this work is done by our park staff, and so the remainder of the park staff are on the shovel crew, and they will do public sidewalks in certain areas, stairwells, civic buildings, and etc. So annual costs, there's a lot of information on this sheet. So we've been tracking our costs obviously since we started, but from 1996 to 2019, you can see that there's a variety of levels of costing. And a lot of this has to do with, you know, cost of labor, cost of fuel, cost of materials. There's so many different variables, even the shifting. And really, it depends on when we get the snow and how much we get. That is the ultimate factor in what our snow program costs us. And you can see that 2018, it was probably the highest. And we had, which I'll show in a few minutes here, a very, I guess it was more of a, we had a lot of snow, but it was just enough to keep the crews out there. Every time it snowed last year, we had to send crews out. Sometimes you get snow like last night where it's a whip, and you don't really need to send the crews out unless it's in a higher elevation. So you can see that it is going up, unfortunately, but it is the cost of doing business. This is a breakdown of our annual 2019 costs. And you can see in the roads division, we're estimating $938,000, and then we spend approximately $123,000 in our sidewalk snow clearing program. And again, this varies. The downtown cleanout. So this area of downtown is our second priority, and typically what happens in the downtown is when we get basically an inch of snow, we will put magnesium chloride or salt to do a melt in the downtown, because typically we can't go in there during the day. When we have more than 3 inches, that's when we send in a crew to actually do a loadout, as we call it. And that means that all of those roads in the downtown area are actually physically cleared, including all of the parking lots. So it's an extensive program that we have. It's typically done between the hours of 9 o'clock and 9 o'clock p.m. and 6 a.m. And that's obviously because there's no traffic going on downtown. In an event where we have a heavy snowfall during the day, we will send a truck down just to keep the roads passable. But it does cause congestion with snow being piled up in the parking lanes. One of the proactive measures that we utilize, and many communities do, is anti-icing, and we utilize magnesium chloride. And it's utilized in using best management practices. Now, magnesium chloride is a naturally forming compound. It's found in Utah and Salt Lake City, and those are the only 2 places in North America that it's actually found. Basically, it's a brine solution we create, and we do pre-wetting, as we call it. So we'll go out and, utilizing our weather forecasts before a snow event, we will actually pre-wet the roads. And this essentially prevents the snow from sticking or compounding, and it buys us some time. The use of magnesium chloride has been studied to death, and it is supported by ICBC and the RCMP to reduce accidents. This is a pretty good slide. It shows an application, and it shows our tandem in the corner with the mag tank and the sprayer. And we applied de-icer 4 days earlier, and this is the application it's showing. So the main road that the magnesium chloride was spread on is black. That means that the snow did not compact or adhere to the roadway. And the second photo is actually a subdivision where we don't apply magnesium chloride. And so you can see there is some benefits to that, because obviously there's some cost savings in the sense that we don't need to send a crew out. And the other thing is that when there's also a cost savings to the materials. So typically if we didn't utilize magnesium chloride, we would be spreading salt and sand. And in very cold conditions, salt and sand typically does the bounce, as you call it. So when we spread it out, if the road is cold, and cars are driving by, the sand and salt typically gets spread off to the edges. So we find that the magnesium chloride not only saves us in spreading materials, the cleanup of the materials in the spring, but just the cost of the materials themselves. Now, what we've done utilizing our GIS system, we've looked at all of the roads within the communities, and we've determined where the steep slopes are. And this helps us basically provide or plan our de-icing routes. And you can see the blue. There's a lot of steeper roads within the community, and so those are our priorities. We go out and we're starting to become more efficient with our spreading of the magnesium, and we have operators that are more conscious of the cost of those loads. So when they go out, they're really only applying the magnesium on the steeper slopes and the areas that are needed. And this is the big question mark. Each snow event, in most cases, requires the same amount of level of response. So depending on how much snow we get, where we get it, because of the community, this is just some examples of Environment Canada's weather forecasting and that we utilize as well, and it shows the different amounts of precipitation. Now this is an analysis that we've done ourselves internally, and you can see that by this chart the number of snow days varies, but it is increasing, and the total precipitation or the total amount of snow is also increasing. So every winter is a different question mark. We don't know what we're going to get. This is a prime example. Last year was, at this time, we had lots of snow. Our crews were busy every day. We haven't been out since Christmas. We're still around. We're still doing some push in the upper elevations. As you know, Salmon Arm has a high elevation change. When it's snowing up top by the airport or up in Hillcrest, it's usually drizzling down in the downtown area. So we have to do different types of applications. So we do have a snow and ice control policy, and it states that low priority areas are not plowed on overtime. And this goes back to our snow schedule. So on the weekends, if we do get a snowfall, we concentrate on the major area, the major roads, the arterials and collectors. If it is a heavy snowfall, that isn't stopping us from getting into the subdivisions and at least making a one pass. In the past, we have had complaints about that, but it does open it up for most of the areas. But we still have to go back. So typically, a few years ago, 2015, we had one of the largest snowfalls on record, and we had all of our crew in. Typically, I think it happened on the Sunday night, and so our crews go continually. So there's nothing stopping us if we have major events. If it's minor, we stick to the arterials, and then on the Monday we'll go back in to the subdivisions and lower priorities. And that goes the same for sidewalks. We do not clear sidewalks on weekends or overtime. So again, having said that, last Christmas we did have snow just before New Year's, so we sent out a crew to at least clear the snows, because we had forecasted that there was going to be a major snow event just before Christmas. So there are varying times when we'll change that, but it's all within scrutiny of the managers. One thing that we utilize is GPS tracking on our vehicles, and this helps us with looking to see where we've got coverage, and also it helps us in any disputes. If it comes up to saying, that you haven't been out here in 2 weeks, we hear that quite often, but it's perception. Typically, you know, your area will get cleared within a 24-hour period or 48-hour period. We have public service announcements, we have after-hours calls, and we also subscribe to a weather forecasting system, which provides emails 3 times a day, and it's updated on an hourly basis in a sense. So we do have the ability to kind of look forward and see what we're going to be getting and how we can staff and man up for that particular event. So the challenges with the program, what do we know? We know the city. We know our topography. We know our equipment. We know the history of the trouble spots. We know where our roads, our bus routes and garbage collection routes are, our road designations, and we have local knowledge. Our staff have been here a long time, so they know where some of the issues are. And we have a fixed budget. What we don't know is the number of snowfall events, the timing of the events, when they're going to happen, and the accumulation of snow. The variables that we can control our philosophy. And that is basically the level of service that we provide to the community. And that is dictated by council. We can control the frequency. How often do we go out? We control our plow routes, our application rates. We control our priority locations. We can control our equipment. And we can control the number of people that are available. And also our communication with the public. What we can't control, obviously, again, is the annual snowfall accumulation, the frequency of the events, the duration of the events, the intensity, the freeze-thaw cycle. We've had systems that have come in and warmed up during the day, cooled off at night. We get drizzle, they freeze. We've had sidewalks that have been glare ice in certain conditions. Temperature trending up and down, equipment malfunctions, we can never control that, and employee availability. On major events in 2015, just using that as an example, we had our guys out, they were working well over the recommended hours of operation. Some were coming in on almost a volunteer basis because they'd worked over 14 hours, which labor standards only allows us to work our crew 14 hours. So for safety, we can't allow that. They're also exposed to the winter elements, right? We have sicknesses. Basically, it's a challenge. But we have very good staff, and they know what they're doing, which is important. The other thing that we can't control is obviously public opinion. And that we're always under scrutiny from the public. So that concludes the presentation. I commonly use these words, and I say it to many people who complain about the roads. You know, our winter ice program is only a substitute for cautious driving. People behind a wheel have to take responsibility for their own driving habits, and we can only do so much. But on the overall, I think we have a very good program. We try our best to manage the budgets, and I think we've been very successful over the years. So if council has any questions.
Thanks. I mean, I take part responsibility. The mayor left town, and I saw a 25% or 25-point drop in air temperature. I saw snowfall events, so this is on me. I apologize. And thanks for the presentation. To Chelsea, maybe just an update of how much money we have in our snow reserve and how much we have budgeted this year and what will happen to those funds if we do not spend them.
Your Worship, there's approximately 85,000 remaining in the snow reserve. The large majority of that was used the past budget year in the spring. And we have about 900,000 budgeted in the roads budget for snow removal and about, I would say, 100 maybe in the sidewalk.
Okay.
And if the funds are not used, it would be best practice to put those monies back into reserve because the events are unpredictable.
Yeah. And Director of Engineering, do you have?
If I could just comment on that as well. So over the last probably 5 years, we haven't been able to build any reserves. because we've constantly been dipping into that area. We've actually had to go in and find money from other accounts to help supplement the snow and ice control program. So, you know, this is going to help us a little bit, but we don't know what's going to happen. Our budget is from January to December.
Yeah, that's...
So we have this phase of winter, and then we go into the fall phase, the second phase. So, you know, if we get a mild winter right now, who knows what's going to bring in October, November of this year.
Yeah, it's our seasonal and fiscal incongruencies there, I guess, right? So 2019 snow budget so far, we've done a really good job of maintaining that, and I'd like to give kudos to us, this table, for that, because that's all us. But the 2018, you get 2 winters. You get the start and the finish of a winter, so we'll see how that goes. Does anyone have any questions on the report or any questions for staff? Councillor Lavery?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Rob, for the report, and again, a shout out to the crew who pulled us off shift by shift, and I think that their expertise is certainly recognizable to most of us, certainly to me as well. Through you, Your Worship, to staff, can we put this report on the website?
Absolutely.
Cool. Councillor Wallace-Richmond?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to pass along my thanks to senior staff and the Top Shop for what they do. I remember that 2015 snow event, as it was called, and we calculated that it was like emptying 1,000 NHL-sized hockey rinks in 4 days or something. It was quite significant. And when you think about 500 kilometers, that's like plowing from here to Calgary every time it snows. It's not an insignificant challenge. So I will say I do see complaints sometimes. I think I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's an enormous privilege that the worst part of your day is that your road wasn't shoveled when you thought it should have been. But that doesn't speak to the amount of time and effort and money the community spends keeping the roads safe and plowed. So thanks again.
Any further comments or questions? I know we're all appreciative of what staff does to make that we get to take credit for on good days, and then defer to staff on bad days. So any other comments? No? Okay. Thanks for the presentation, and I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Lindgren, second by Councillor Wallace-Richmond. All those in favor? Carried. Adjourned at 9:46.